Now, in the last 5 minutes that we have, I want to explain the last couple of verses because they are difficult to understand. Right? There might be no verse in the Bible that has given Bible teachers more difficulty than verse 49. Because there's no parallel to it. Nowhere else is this word language used in this way, where it says everyone will be salted with fire. And so we're left to try to figure it out from the context, as well as other scriptures that relate to it. And there's lots of different explanations, but I'm not going to go into all the explanations. I just want to tell you, as I sought the Lord this week, and I read what everyone had written, and I listened to what preachers had said, and Stephen Lawson had a very helpful sermon on it, I asked God for wisdom, for insight, to be able to explain this to you, and I hope that this will be helpful. Everyone will be salted with fire. In the Old Testament sacrifices, as it says in Ezekiel, the sacrifices were presented with salt. You shall present these sacrifices before the Lord, and the priest shall sprinkle salt on them and offer them up as a burnt offering to the Lord. So what Jesus is saying here, in light of the way that salt is used and fire is used in conjunction with the temple apparatum, is that every person is going to be put on the heavenly altar before God. And that we are going to be salted in fire. That what was happening when the Old Testament sacrifices were brought to God is that the animal was being offered up to God as a sacrifice. And here's the truth. Every one of you is going to be put on the altar of God in heaven, and you are going to be salted in fire. The totality of your being, who you are, who you've become, the choices that you've made, the things that you've said, the things that you've done, it's going on the heavenly altar. And for those who have not heard the call of Jesus, who have not been born again, who have not become like little children, who have not walked the way of the cross, who have not attained holiness, there's the eternal fire that Jesus has just been talking about. Everyone will be salted with fire. But that includes us, who are believers. For those who have attained holiness, for those who have heard the call, for those who have walked with Christ, for those who have become like little children, you will also stand before the throne of God. You will be placed on the altar, and what is worthless in your life will be burned up. You can read about this experience in Paul's letter to the Corinthians. I encourage you to jot down 1 Corinthians 3, verses 10 through 17. I think this is a key passage for understanding what Jesus means when he says everyone will be salted with fire. Believers will be salted with fire. Paul describes that in 1 Corinthians 3, verses 10 through 17. If anyone's work is burned up, he will suffer loss, though he himself will be saved, but only as through fire. Are you ready to be offered up on the altar in God's presence? What in your life is going to be burned up and you're going to suffer loss? Is it your entire soul being worthless, being lost in sin, that is going to be burned up for ages in the lake of fire? Or is it the remaining works of fleshliness that is going to be burned up and you will be saved, but only as through fire? And Jesus, having spoken about those who were going into the fires of hell before this verse, after it, he talks about those who are believers, who are followers of Christ. In verse 50, salt is good. Salt represents that which is incorruptible. Salt was essential in the ancient world because it was what they had to preserve food from the decay, from the putrefaction that settles in with meat. Salt was essential because it was that which was incorruptible and conveyed incorruptibility to that to which it touched. And so salt represents holiness. That's why the sacrifices were given with salt, because the salt would represent the food, the meat on the altar not becoming corrupted with putrefaction. And so salt is good. Holiness is good. It's good that God is holy. It's good that God is a righteous fire. It's good.